Hey guys, tonight we're going back to a time when staying alive mostly meant running, hiding, or pretending to be much, much poorer than you actually were. We're diving into the 13th century, into the uneasy quiet before the Mongol storm. Yes, this was the age of Genghis Khan's empire, history's most aggressive group project. You're about to find out just how well you do when a Mongol invasion rolls into town. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know what corner of the world you're trying to fall asleep in tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying on your straw-stuffed mattress, the one that crunches when you roll over and smells vaguely like a damp sheep. When the first rumors drift into your village on the smoke-scented breeze, word has it there are riders. Not local ones, not bandits or tax collectors this time, but strangers from far beyond the horizon. Fast, quiet, impossible to catch or outrun. You overhear them in hushed voices. Mongols. You've heard that word before, but only in stories passed between traders, in whispers over mugs of barley beer, in legends about people who could ride for days without stopping, shoot backwards off a horse, and aim well enough to pick the coin from your pocket before you knew you were robbed. They say they come from the east, from lands so far you can't even picture the edge. And now, somehow, impossibly, they're here, or close enough that people have started walking a little faster, locking their doors a little tighter, and pretending not to worry. But you're definitely worrying. Your family's hut, while cozy in a loosely held together with mud sort of way, doesn't exactly scream impenetrable fortress. Your prized possessions include a wooden spoon, two mismatched goats, and a fur hat that may or may not be a raccoon. Not much to defend yourself with. You walk to the edge of the village and stare out over the fields, ripe with wheat, waving in the wind like they don't know the world's about to change. The air feels thicker. Your skin prickles. Is that thunder? Or just the dull drumbeat of hooves, pounding the ground somewhere far off, maybe in the next valley? Probably nothing. Probably. The elders meet. You're not invited, obviously, because you're not old or important or particularly clever. But you hear enough to know they're arguing. Half think the Mongols will pass you by like the taxman does when your house looks too sad to bother with. The other half is suggesting it might be time to prepare. You'd like to know what prepare means, but no one seems to know, not even the people saying it. So they talk, and eventually go home to quietly hope for the best. Hope, historically speaking, doesn't work out great in moments like this. That night, the village feels different. Even the animals are quiet, which is unsettling because usually the goats will bleat at anything. The moon, the wind, a tree that looks suspiciously like a person. But tonight they're silent. You lie awake listening to the creak of wood and the occasional faraway dog bark, wondering if this is what it feels like just before everything changes. And still, no one does anything. People sweep their homes like that'll make a difference. Your mother roasts turnips and hums a song about spring. Your neighbor hammers a second latch onto his door using an old horseshoe and a prayer. You wonder what the Mongols actually look like. Are they giants? Do they breathe fire? Are they really just men with bows and scary mustaches? Everyone acts like the stories are exaggerated, but they always say that, don't they? Until they're not. A merchant wagon limps into the village 2 days later. It's half-burned. The merchant himself is barely conscious, clinging to the side of the cart like a scarecrow who's seen too much. He smells like smoke, and his eyes are too wide. When he speaks, he does so slowly, like his mouth is fighting him. They've burned everything, he says. Everything. Someone tries to ask if they're close, but he just stares into the middle distance like he's still watching flames. You don't get more details. He dies that night in the church, clutching a melted silver coin. No one knows if he was trying to donate it or just couldn't let go. Now it's real. Now the illusion of safety peels off like cheap paint in the rain. The elders meet again, this time with less confidence and more yelling. Someone suggests sending scouts. Someone else suggests praying harder. You suggest, privately, to your goats that perhaps it's time to learn how to be fast. They seem unimpressed. Still, you've seen enough to know this isn't just another passing army. These aren't knights in shining armor or royal tax officials demanding grain. These are people who don't negotiate, who burn, ride, and vanish before you know what's missing. Historians still wonder how the Mongols managed to move so quickly, covering distances in days that should have taken weeks. Some claim their horses were part of it. Stocky steppe ponies, smaller than war horses but almost inexhaustible. Others whisper about networks of riders, like a dark version of the Pony Express, trading out fresh mounts every few miles. No one's really sure, because by the time anyone tried to take notes, the note-taker was already a pile of ash. But it's true, they moved faster than people thought was possible. Sometimes they say, word of the Mongols reached a city after the Mongols did. And so your village begins to unravel slowly. People pretend to go about their business, but you can see it. Windows get boarded. The old man who sells chickens suddenly vanishes with all his birds. A couple from the edge of town leaves in the middle of the night, dragging a cart of potatoes and a baby who will not stop crying. Your uncle sharpens a rusty sword he hasn't used in 20 years and mutters about honor. Your aunt tells him to stop being stupid and pack lentils instead. You feel both of them might be right. You hear hoes in your dreams. You wake up convinced the horizon is on fire. You start sleeping in your clothes, if only because the idea of fleeing barefoot seems like a bad time. The only good news is that your goats, so far, remain blissfully unaware that history is happening. You envy them. You want to be a goat. A week later, a scout returns, barely. He's not from your village, but you meet him halfway when he stumbles and like someone chased him out of the afterlife. He says they're close now, real close, a few valleys over. He says the last town didn't stand a chance. There were no walls, and the people didn't run fast enough. He talks about arrows falling like rain and people screaming before they knew what hit them. He says the Mongols don't yell or taunt. They're quiet, methodical. They show up, kill everything, and move on like it's just another Tuesday. That night, the elders stop pretending. An evacuation is suggested, strongly, but no one agrees where to go. South is too dry. West is forest. East is where the Mongols came from. North? North is just more villages that probably haven't figured it out yet. So instead, everyone does what humans do best when faced with impossible odds. They panic a little, argue more, and then try to act normal. But you can't unhear the stories. You walk out to the field at dawn and stare eastward. The sky is bruising, thick with cloud. The sun feels reluctant. You wonder how many more mornings you'll get to stand here, how many more evenings you'll spend on your crunch straw bed before the sound of hoofbeats isn't distant anymore. And yet, somehow, even now, the turnips still grow. The goats still bleat. And the village still holds its breath, pretending, just a little longer, that everything is totally, completely fine. You wake up before the sun, which is rude because it's supposed to be the one waking you. But something's different this morning. There's no bird song, no chatter from early risers outside, no smell of oat porridge wafting from the neighbor's hut. Just a thick, quiet tension pressing against your windows like a held breath. And then it hits. The distant rhythmic pounding of hoofbeats. Not a few, not casual, a lot. The Mongols are close, so close it feels like the air itself is trying to get out of the way. Your heart drops somewhere near your ankles. You throw in your cloak, grab your pouch of dried peas, a chunk of bread, and your favorite spoon, for emotional support, and bowl out the door, only to find the entire village already moving in a sort of frenzied, low-volume panic. Nobody's screaming, but the energy is loud. Bags are slung over shoulders, crying children are strapped to backs, and a group of elders is attempting to argue while speed walking toward absolutely nowhere in particular. You join the mass of fleeing people, the world's least organized parade, and realize very quickly that fleeing is somehow both faster and slower than you imagined. People keep stopping to tie sandals, say awkward goodbyes to chickens, or remember they left the pot boiling back home. It's chaos with a strong undertone of "I should have planned for this." The road, if you can even call it that, is a bumpy dirt path framed by wilted grass and regret. It's not meant for hundreds of suddenly homeless peasants dragging carts, crying toddlers, and goats who absolutely do not understand the urgency of the situation. You try to keep pace with a neighbor who's pushing a wheelbarrow filled with cabbage and children. It's hard to say which is heavier, but you're constantly interrupted by someone losing a shoe, someone else tripping over a root, and the occasional distant thud that makes everyone freeze for a full 10 seconds before continuing again like absolutely nothing happened. Your feet already hurt, and it's only been an hour. This is going to be a long, miserable journey, made worse by the fact that no one seems to know where you're going. South? Maybe. There's a river in that direction, and possibly a town that hasn't burned yet. Maybe. Everyone's counting on maybe now, because definitely left the conversation weeks ago. You catch a glimpse of your house as you crest a hill, your little wattle and daub hut that was never fancy but had just enough leaks to feel like home. You're not sentimental, usually, but seeing it sitting there quietly, windows open like it's waiting for you to come back for supper, makes your chest ache. You feel stupid for not grabbing more. Your blanket, your best wooden bowl, the dried apple slices your aunt gave you for your name day. But you didn't have time. None of you did. You just left. And now your house is someone else's problem. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll burn before the next moonrise. Your goat pens turn to smoke. Your modest pile of turnips turn to ash. You look away before you can picture it too clearly. The march continues. Dirt kicks into your eyes, your nose, your mouth. It's everywhere. You start to wonder if you'll ever be clean again. Your tunic clings to you with a combination of sweat and despair. Someone starts singing, trying to lift spirits, but it's an old funeral chant and nobody's in the mood for irony. The sun climbs higher, offering heat but no warmth, just a flat, oppressive glare that makes the road shimmer and your mood shrivel. You chew on the bread you brought, hard enough to break a tooth and dry enough to feel like eating burlap. You share a bite with a child who hasn't stopped hiccuping since sunrise. They look up at you like you're a hero, which is flattering and wildly inaccurate. By midday, you've learned a few important things about traveling in a peasant panic caravan. 1. Goats are worse than toddlers. 2. Toddlers are worse than goats. 3. Whatever you didn't bring with you is the exact thing you now desperately need. A hat would be nice. So would water, or a cushion, or shoes that don't squeak like a mouse drowning in a wine barrel. People are trying to be brave. Mostly, there's quiet grumbling, but no full-blown sobbing yet. Though you suspect that's coming once night falls and everyone realizes they've traded their homes for a ditch. Speaking of ditches, you find one. It's not fancy, just a sunken hollow next to a patch of scraggly bushes, but it offers shade and, more importantly, a place to collapse without getting trampled. Your little group, now about 30 strong, decides to stop there for a bit. You sit down and immediately regret it. The ground is made of rocks and disappointment, but you're too tired to care. The village elder tries to make a speech, something inspiring about endurance and unity, but they lose their voice halfway through and end up just wheezing dramatically while someone fans them with a cabbage leaf. A couple of younger men offer to scout ahead, see if there's a proper camp nearby, or maybe someone with a donkey cart and poor judgment. They leave, and now you wait. Waiting, it turns out, is almost worse than fleeing. At least when you're moving, you feel like you're doing something. Now, every sound becomes a question mark. Was that thunder? A rider? A rabbit? You stare into the trees, imagining shapes that might be horses or just your nerves making shadows move. Someone opens a sack of beans and starts passing them around like they're hosting a dinner party. It's nice in a way, a shared misery. You swap stories, Not because they're new or exciting, but because talking fills the silence. One woman says her cousin once survived a Mongol attack by pretending to be dead under a pile of hay. Another swears her grandmother knew a man who tricked the Mongols by dressing as a monk and reciting gibberish until they left him alone. They don't like weird, she says seriously. Try to be weird if you get caught. You file that away under. Weirdly helpful. As dusk settles in, the group gets quieter. Fires aren't an option. You don't want to be seen from the road. So everyone huddles under blankets, cloaks, or just each other. You lie back, using your bag as a pillow, and stare up at the sky, which looks smugly peaceful. Stars blink into view, indifferent to your suffering. You wonder if people in other parts of the world are also staring at this same sky, wondering if their homes will still exist by morning. Probably. The Mongols covered a lot of ground. Their empire eventually stretched farther than anyone thought an empire could. Historians still debate how Genghis Khan managed to coordinate such a vast force with such terrifying efficiency. Was it brutal discipline, ingenious messaging systems, or just really good management skills? No one knows for sure, but you're starting to believe that whatever they did, it worked. You shift onto your side, trying to find a patch of ground that isn't directly stabbing your hip bone. You fail. Your neighbor snores softly beside you, and someone's baby is making the saddest hiccuping noise known to man. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls because apparently you didn't have enough anxiety already. You pull your cloak tighter and try to imagine a future where this ends. Not necessarily happily, just ends. You picture yourself reaching a friendly village, one with real walls and a bakery and a well that doesn't taste like pennies. Maybe they'll let you stay. Maybe you'll become a broom maker. That sounds peaceful. Low stakes. No one ever invades a broom maker. In the morning, the scouts return. They didn't find a town, but they did find a bigger ditch. Progress. You repack your things, half of which are now covered in someone else's hay, and rejoin the caravan. Your legs ache. Your back makes popping sounds it shouldn't. But you keep moving. You're a refugee now, officially. There's no going back. Your house is probably already gone. All that's left is the road ahead. A pack of fellow dirt-smeared travelers, and the hope that the next place will be safer. Or at least drier. Someone starts humming again. Not a funeral song this time, but something vaguely hopeful. You join in, not because you know the words, but because the rhythm matches the crunch of your feet against the path. The sun rises. You squint toward it, blinking against the light, and think, okay, you're not dead yet. That counts for something. The road curves ahead like a question mark you haven't answered yet. And so, sore and sunburned and smelling like every animal you've ever owned, you follow it. The forest sounded like such a good idea at the time. Green, quiet, safe, mysterious, full of berries and poetic survival moments where you become one with nature and maybe have a revelation about the meaning of life. But now, standing ankle-deep in mud, clutching a damp cloak that smells like mildew and bad decisions, you're beginning to understand why people usually build towns instead of just living in the woods. You and your band of newly outdoorsy refugees have traded leaky roofs and crumbly bread for towering trees and squirrels with judgmental stares. There's no path anymore, just roots and underbrush and whatever direction someone vaguely points in while muttering, I think there's a stream this way. You're not sure who put this person in charge, but at this point, following someone with misplaced confidence feels better than standing still and becoming tree moss. The deeper you go, the darker it gets. Not scary dark, but that heavy, shadowed kind of dark where every twig snap feels personal. The canopy above blots out the sun so thoroughly that time stops matching. Is it mid-morning? Late afternoon? Forever o'clock? You lose all sense of it as you dodge low branches and try not to trip over roots that really seem like they're trying to kill you. You've learned to walk with a slightly crouched, endlessly irritated posture that says, I might be hiding from the Mongols, but I'm also very annoyed about this fern in my sock. At first, the forest felt like a hidden sanctuary. It whispered of safety. No horses, no arrows, no distant towns burning in the night. Just the rustling of leaves, the occasional bird call, and the constant, nagging realization that you have no idea what you're doing. You were a peasant, not a druid. You know how to plow a field, not identify edible mushrooms. Your idea of survival was don't insult the baker's wife. Now you're expected to forage, build a lean-to out of twigs and optimism, and sleep in a pile of damp leaves like some sort of woodland ghost. The first night is an education. You try to make a bed out of moss and twigs, which sounds poetic but is mostly itchy. The air is cold, the ground is colder, and every single bug in the world has apparently been waiting for you. You lie awake trying to decide whether that thing crawling on your neck is a spider or just a very ambitious ant. Either way, it's not great. And just when you think you're finally drifting off, something howls, or growls, or maybe coughs. Whatever it is, it's large, it's close, and it absolutely does not care that you're trying to fall asleep. You scoot closer to the others, pretending you're just cold, not terrified, and try to convince yourself that wolves mostly eat nobles. Statistically speaking, they probably do. By morning, everything is wet. Everything. Your clothes, your food, your dignity. The forest floor holds moisture like a bitter old man holds grudges. You squish when you walk. You wrinkle when you sit. Someone tries to light a fire, but everything's too damp, so instead you huddle around a very determined pile of smoldering disappointment. Breakfast is a handful of unidentifiable berries and a piece of bread that's absorbed enough due to qualify as a sponge. You eat it anyway. Hunger, it turns out, makes you much less picky. One guy swears he saw a deer and spends 2 hours trying to make a bow from a bent stick and some string he found in his shoe. It doesn't work, but it keeps him busy, and that's worth something. The rest of the day is spent trying to figure out where to put waste, because shockingly, no one wants to live next to the bathroom bush. Eventually, a system is established. Dig a hole, cover it with shame and leaves, and pray the smell doesn't follow you back to camp. You try to stay positive. After all, this is temporary. Probably. The Mongols will move on eventually. You just have to wait. Survive. Not die from exposure, starvation, or a fatal case of mosquito-induced rage. Some people in the group are surprisingly upbeat. One woman starts weaving grass into little baskets. A man sings about cheese. A child builds a fort out of sticks and then declares himself forest king, which is cute until he starts demanding taxes. You make a game of spotting birds, though you only know the names of about 3 of them. That one's probably a warbler, you say confidently, pointing at something that's definitely just a leaf. No one corrects you. You're all just pretending now. Historically, many people did hide in forests during the Mongol invasions. Some communities abandoned their towns entirely and lived like ghosts in the woods, moving constantly, leaving behind only ashes and footprints. Forests offered cover, food, and some strategic advantage if you knew how to use them. The Mongols weren't fond of dense woodlands. Their horses, built for open plains, weren't ideal for navigating undergrowth and low-hanging branches. It's said that entire groups avoided destruction simply by vanishing into the trees, living off the land like reluctant elves with bladder problems. But surviving in the forest long-term wasn't easy. You'd run out of supplies fast, and most peasants weren't trained in wilderness living. That wasn't part of the job description. You were supposed to pay taxes, farm grain, and avoid eye contact with knights. Not fight moss for a dry spot to sleep. You start developing forest habits. You walk with your eyes down, checking for mushrooms and rabbit poop, like a professional. You whisper instead of talking, even when no one's around. You learn how to make a crude shelter by tying together saplings and covering them with leaves, which works until it rains, and then you're basically just sleeping inside a wet salad. One guy in your group insists on calling it glamping, and no one knows what that means, but you all agree to stop inviting him to things. At some point, someone brings up the idea of eating bugs. You laugh, then you stop laughing. Then you eat a cricket. You don't talk about it afterward. The days blend together. You lose count. The forest has no clocks, and the sky is mostly blocked, so time becomes something you measure in mosquito bites and how long it takes your socks to dry. You find a small stream, freezing, loud, and glorious. You bathe in it, sort of if flailing while screaming counts as bathing. It helps. Kind of. At least you no longer smell like fermented despair. Someone suggests setting up a more permanent camp nearby, since the stream means water and possibly fish. You've never fished before, but how hard can it be? Very hard, it turns out. You spend 2 hours trying to stab a trout with a stick before it mocks you by swimming lazily away. Nature is rude. Historians still debate just how effective forest hiding actually was. Some argue it was a smart, tactical retreat that saved countless lives. Others say it was mostly a temporary stall before starvation or disease caught up. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Some groups emerge from the woods weeks or months later, weaker but alive. Others simply vanished. You wonder what category you'll end up in. The idea of vanishing feels a little too poetic now that your ankles are covered in bug bites the size of small coins, and your last pair of dry socks has developed sentience and is threatening to leave. At night, you tell stories. Old ones about gods and monsters, and new ones about how you used to live somewhere with a door that actually latched and food that didn't require guessing. You wrap yourself in your too thin cloak and stare up through the branches, looking for stars, finding only hints of light. You feel small. You feel tired, but you're still here. That counts. You've survived another day. You're not clean, you're not comfortable, and you're not particularly hopeful, but you're here. The forest creaks around you like a living thing, ancient and uncaring. You nestle deeper into the leaves, close your eyes, and tell yourself that tomorrow might be better. Probably not, but maybe, and maybe is enough to fall asleep with. By the time you stumble into the walled town, your cloak smells like something that crawled out of a bog and lost a fight with a cabbage. You're hungry, damp, scratched up from every possible branch that ever existed, and just grateful to see stone walls, tall, solid, unimpressive but promising. The gates creak open slowly, like even they're reluctant to let in another mud-crusted refugee. Inside it's crowded, not bustling marketplace crowded, but everyone from 5 villages is now sharing one town square and exactly 2 latrines crowded. You're herded along like livestock with the others, assigned a patch of dirt in what may have once been a public garden, and given a ladleful of something pretending to be soup. It's brown, it's hot, and it tastes like regret with a dash of boiled socks. Still, you eat it. Hunger makes philosophers of us all. And now you live here, or squat here, more accurately, inside the kind of town that feels like it was built quickly and then forgotten, now resurrected under the pressure of please don't let us die. The walls are cracked in places, but tall enough to inspire mild hope. People speak in whispers. Rumors are the primary form of communication. The Mongols are a day away, or a week, or already watching from the hills, depending on who you ask. No one knows anything, but everyone's sure it's bad. The townspeople are both kind and twitchy. Some share food. Others side-eye you like you personally invited the invaders. A woman offers you a crust of bread and then mutters something about lice. There's a general air of we're all in this together, but I will absolutely shove you off the wall if it means I get a turnip. The town's leadership consists of 3 old men with impressive beards, a local priest who talks too much about martyrdom, and a merchant who seems to think this is a networking opportunity. They hold meetings in the town square, loudly debating things like rations and defensive strategies, while villagers nod sagely and privately wonder how many days you can go without washing before your clothes start trying to leave your body on their own. Siege life, as it turns out, is mostly about boredom, smells, and awkward silences. You spend most of your days doing tasks that are just barely useful, carrying buckets, fetching firewood, pretending to mend walls with mud and vague optimism. People take turns watching from the ramparts, squinting into the distance like they're expecting salvation or, more realistically, a horde of horsemen and arrows. The actual soldiers, if you can call them that, are mostly farmers in mismatched armor, wielding spears that were clearly made from fence posts. They walk around like they've read about war once in a poem and are now hoping enthusiasm will substitute for training. You try not to stare. You also try not to think about what happens if the Mongols actually show up. And then, of course, they do. Or at least, something does. One morning, a horn sounds. Not a heroic, cinematic kind of horn, but a flat, wheezy thing that sounds like someone stepped on a goose. Panic spreads like mold. You rush to the top of the wall, heart hammering, and there, on the horizon, they appear. Tiny at first, just dark dots moving in a pattern far too smooth to be a coincidence. Riders. So many of them. Silent. Organized. The kind of army that doesn't look like it might attack. It looks like it already decided to. The town goes into its version of lockdown. Gates barred, guards posted, civilians told to stay calm, while also being handed pitchforks just in case. You spend the next few hours oscillating between nervous chatter and staring blankly at the wall in front of you. Time stretches like old cheese. The Mongols don't attack that day, or the next. They camp, set up neat rows of tents like it's a picnic. No yelling, no demands, just quiet presence, like a storm parked right outside your door, waiting for you to blink. You learn quickly that sieges are long, uncomfortable, and deeply unglamorous. It's not all fireballs and battering rams. Mostly it's a game of who breaks first. Food runs low shockingly fast. The soup becomes thinner. Bread is cut into such small slices you start to wonder if someone's using a hair to measure. People get testy. Hygiene becomes a theoretical concept. There are designated waste areas, but they're not nearly far enough from a well. You try not to think about it when you drink. Everyone starts smelling the same. Sweat, smoke, and a faint aroma of despair. You make friends with a rat that lives under a broken cart. You name him Sir Squeaks. He's surprisingly judgmental. One day, a messenger appears, alone calm, dressed in simple clothes, but carrying the kind of confidence that says, "I am not the one who needs to worry." He rides up to the gate, dismounts, and offers a scroll. A guard takes it with tongs like it might explode. The message is simple. Surrender, and you'll be spared. Refuse, and, well, don't. The elders argue. One wants to give in. One insists you can hold out. The priest offers to lead a prayer circle, which is met with impressive silence. Eventually, the town decides to wait just a little longer. Maybe the Mongols will get bored. Maybe help will come. Maybe soup will start tasting like something again. Lots of maybes. The waiting continues. Weeks pass. Supplies dwindle to the kind of rations that make you nostalgic for plain boiled turnips. Someone starts selling boiled shoe leather as artisan stew. The merchant tries to start a ration-based loyalty program. No one is amused. You scrape mold off a piece of bread and chew slowly, trying to remember what cheese tastes like. The only entertainment is watching people try to climb the wall without slipping, and the increasingly weird games children invent with sticks, rocks, and questionable moral guidelines. One game involves throwing mud at a drawing of a Mongol on a wall. You're disturbingly good at it. You notice something else too: how quiet the Mongols are. They don't shout, don't taunt, they just exist. Sometimes you see them practicing maneuvers in the distance, archery drills, riding formations like they're keeping busy while they wait for you to give up. It's unnerving. No drama. Just calm, patient menace. Historians still puzzle over how the Mongols managed such psychological warfare without saying a word. Their silence was often louder than any threat. It worked. People cracked under it. Gates were opened out of exhaustion more than fear. And then the first wall breach happens. Not from a siege engine or direct attack, but from within. A section of the wall gives out during a storm. Bad mortar, poor maintenance, or just one too many rats using it as a highway. No one's sure. But suddenly you've got a hole big enough to let in very small horses or very determined doom. Everyone panics. Patching it becomes a priority. You haul stones, mud, anything you can find. A man sacrifices his family's dining bench. Another donates a large portrait of someone's grandfather to use as reinforcement. It helps. Barely. The Mongols don't move. Still waiting. Still watching. You begin to think they might outlast the stone itself. It rains. It rains more. Your bed is damp. Your blanket is damp. Your soul is damp. And yet, somehow, you're still here. Still chewing stale oats. Still helping patch walls with a mix of hay, mud, and stubbornness. You learn things. How to boil moss. How to look busy when the guards walk by. How to tell if someone's hoarding onions by their suspiciously shiny hair. At night, the town feels like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, but strained. Fires are few, mostly for cooking. You huddle near one, listening to the crackle and pretending it's warmer than it is. Someone tells a joke. It's not funny, but you laugh anyway. You have to. Laughter, bad soup, and the faint hope that this will eventually end are all that hold people together now. You wonder what life will be like after. If there will be an after. Will you go back to your village? Rebuild? Will you ever eat a decent onion again? These are the big questions now. Not glory, not politics, just survival, and the dream of sleeping on something that isn't a broken door propped up by bricks. And still, the Mongols wait. It starts as all great historical blunders do, with a meeting, an emergency gathering of the town's finest minds, which in this case means the mayor, a man who once bartered 12 sacks of barley for a catapult that exploded on its first throw, a merchant who thinks he's in charge because he owns 4 tunics, a priest who has more opinions than followers, and 3 elders who have been arguing about the same fence line for the last 20 years. You're not invited, obviously, because you're not important, but the walls of the town hall are thin, the windows are open, and your curiosity is stronger than your dignity. So you linger nearby with a handful of equally nosy townsfolk, pretending to pick herbs while actually eavesdropping like your life depends on it, because, let's face it, it might. The topic on the table? How to deal with the quiet but increasingly irritating Mongol siege parked just outside your walls. No one has attacked yet, but everyone feels it. Like a storm cloud that refuses to break, just hangs there, heavy with the promise of doom. Some want to fight, others want to surrender, and at least one person suggests trying to bribe them with barrels of pickled herring, which is met with stunned silence and a faint gagging sound from someone outside the door. The merchant is loudest. Gold, he insists, slapping the table with the confidence of someone who has never fought anyone more dangerous than a fishmonger with a price dispute. Gold always works. Everyone likes gold. We offer tribute, maybe a few useful townspeople, blacksmiths, bakers, astrologers. Present it as a gift of cultural enrichment. You picture the Mongols holding a terrified baker and wondering what exactly they're supposed to do with him. The mayor's face wrinkles like he just swallowed a nail. You want to give them our people? He asks, scandalized. Voluntarily, the priest interjects, reminding everyone that martyrdom is noble and that suffering brings one closer to the divine, which is exactly the kind of thing you say when you live in a stone building and eat tax-funded cheese. The elders, predictably, are divided. One thinks surrender is inevitable. Another says the town has good bones and can withstand a long siege if people just stop eating so much soup. The third hasn't spoken yet, but is loudly chewing something in the corner, which seems to be his main form of contribution. Eventually, someone, probably the merchant, again, suggests negotiation. Diplomacy. Talking to the Mongols. Not exactly surrendering, not exactly standing strong. Just buying time. Bluffing. Maybe even impressing them with a display of honor, cultural understanding, and, as someone delicately puts it, our unique town charm. You can practically hear the Mongols laughing already. Still, the idea sticks. Because the truth is, no one wants to die. Not for a cracked wall and a soggy garden plot. Not for a mayor who once got stuck in his own outhouse. not even for the principle of resistance. Survival is trending right now. And if groveling keeps you breathing, then bring out the good linens and start groveling in style. So a delegation is formed. The mayor, because protocol; the merchant, because he wouldn't shut up; the priest, because divine insurance; and, oddly, the town baker, who speaks 5 languages and once traded bread with a Mongol scout 2 years ago. You watch as they're dressed in the best garments available. Clean tunics, polished boots, and a hat so elaborate it requires its own assistant. They're given a cart filled with token gifts, spices, some silver jewelry, a goose that no one particularly liked, and a hand-carved model of the town that was originally intended as a wedding gift. As they roll toward the gates, the rest of you gather to watch like it's theater, waving half-heartedly and whispering bets on whether they'll return with a peace treaty or in pieces. The gates open, creak ominously, and then close again behind them. Silence falls like a thick fog. Time stretches. You stare at the horizon so hard your eyes start to water. And then, after what feels like forever, the cart returns. Slowly. The goose is missing. So is most of the silver. But the negotiators look unharmed. Tired, pale, slightly traumatized, but still in one piece. They hold a scroll like it's made of fire. The mayor reads it aloud in the square, his voice wavering only slightly. The Mongols have agreed, tentatively, not to attack. Yet, they've accepted the gifts, admired the model town, and even complimented the bread, which makes the baker tear up slightly. But they also made it clear, this is not a treaty. It's a pause, a test. The town will continue to send weekly tribute, food, supplies, maybe even craftsmen, until further notice. In exchange, no arrows, no fire. For now, there's a strange mix of relief and dread. You're alive. Hooray. But now you're also a client town, which is fancy political speak for polite hostage. You're expected to be useful, entertaining even. One wrong move, 1 week of bad bread or unpolished silver, and the deal could disappear like morning mist. The town tries to adjust. A tribute schedule is posted. Everyone must contribute. Some offer grain, others crafts. One man offers his mother-in-law, which gets him a swift slap and a mandatory week of latrine duty. The merchant takes charge of tribute coordination, which means he mostly walks around holding a clipboard and sighing dramatically. The priest, meanwhile, claims that divine intervention worked and starts planning a sermon series called Bribery as a spiritual act. You can't decide if you're impressed or just deeply exhausted. Historians still debate how much room towns really had when it came to Mongol diplomacy. Were these agreements genuine negotiations or just elaborate ways to delay the inevitable? Some believe the Mongols were surprisingly open to peaceful submission, so long as tribute was regular and loyalty unquestioned. Others argue that any pause was simply strategic, part of a larger psychological campaign that made conquest easier and more efficient. Whatever the case, your town has become a test case, a living experiment in grovel-based survival. And it works. For a while. There's a shift in the town's atmosphere. People walk straighter. They clean their faces. They even sweep the streets, though no one really knows why. You're not expecting visitors. Still, it feels important, like if you act civilized enough, maybe you'll convince the universe not to kill you. Tribute shipments go out weekly. The Mongols, true to their word, don't attack. They don't say much of anything. You never see more than a few riders at a time, collecting goods with a quiet efficiency that makes even your most stoic neighbors nervous. They rarely speak. When they do, it's short, blunt, polite in a way that somehow makes it worse. Once one of them smiled. No one slept well for days after that. You begin to adapt, to normalize the absurd. You teach yourself to fix broken tools, just in case they want a blacksmith next. You start practicing foreign phrases. Hello, we are not a threat. Please take this wheel of cheese and leave us be. The children play tribute games now, pretending to fill carts with invisible goods and negotiate with imaginary warlords. It's both cute and horrifying. The town holds its breath week after week, praying that the gifts are good enough, that the silence outside the wall stays just silent enough. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows this is not peace. This is waiting. And then one day it shifts again. The Mongol riders are late, only by a few hours, but that's enough to stir up all kinds of doom-scented anxiety. People fidget. Some whisper that the truce is over. Others say they probably just stopped for lunch. You don't buy it. Nothing about them has ever felt casual. You go to bed that night, wrapped in blankets and dread. The next morning, the gates creak open to reveal a note. No messenger, just a piece of parchment nailed to the outer wall. It reads, "Next week, more grain." And a tailor. That's it. No threat. No explanation. Just a demand. You don't know if it's a good sign or a bad one. But it's a sign. You're still alive. Still intact. Still playing the longest, most nerve-wracking game of don't make eye contact in history. And honestly, that feels like victory. You're several days out from your town now, traveling with a new group of fellow wanderers. Some from villages burned months ago, others who simply never stopped walking after the first siege smoke blackened the horizon, and none of you quite sure where you're headed. You keep moving west, or at least you think it's west. Direction is now more a vibe than a science. The air has changed, heavier, older somehow. Trees grow thinner. The roads stretch longer between signs of life. And then you see it, what looks like a city rising on the horizon, or at least the ghost of one. Your tire bones perk up just slightly. Maybe it's still occupied. Maybe there's food, shelter, a bath that doesn't involve apologizing to a muddy river. You hurry forward, feet aching, heart cautiously hopeful. But as you approach the gate, what's left of it? You realize something's wrong. The stone is scorched. The towers half collapsed. The whole place has the energy of a party that ended badly and was cleaned up by fire. This is no city. Not anymore. It's a husk, a fossil, a monument to the kind of disaster you can still smell in the mortar. You pass through the remains of the gate with the others, your footsteps echoing in ways that shouldn't echo. There are too many walls missing for sound to bounce like that, but it does like voices still linger here, bouncing around out of habit. The streets are wide and mostly empty, save for a few carts frozen mid-escape, as if their owners dropped the reins mid-sprint and simply vanished. A child's toy lies in the middle of the road, blackened at the edges but mostly intact, which somehow hurts more than anything else. You walk slowly, reverently, like you've entered a church no one prays in anymore. Buildings gape open where roofs once were, their interiors exposed to the sky like broken teeth. There are scorch marks on the walls, curved and reaching, like the fire had fingers. You see a wall where someone once painted vines and grapes, now smeared with soot. A staircase that goes nowhere, a square filled with ash. It's quiet here, not the peaceful kind, but the hollow, taut silence that feels like the space between thunder and lightning. Something terrible happened here, and the land hasn't stopped holding its breath. You camp inside what must have once been a guild hall. A large stone structure with one wall missing entirely. The floors still decorated with fragments of mosaic that probably used to show gods or saints or important people with heroic chins. Now it's just tiles and dirt. You sit with a few others, sharing dry bread and silence, occasionally whispering when the quiet gets too sharp. Someone jokes that this place must have had terrible plumbing, and you all laugh, a little too hard because it's that or cry. After a while, someone asks what city this was. No one knows. The names blur together now. Otrer, Nishaper, Chernigov, Zaranj. Cities that have libraries, towers, bakeries, and beautiful people with complicated relationships. Cities with governments and gossip. Cities that wrote plays, through festivals minted coins. Gone. Just like that. You're standing in one of them now, and you don't even know its name. That fact sits in your gut like a stone. A city existed. People lived, loved, fought over flower prices. And now it's a memory even the ground seems reluctant to keep. The Mongols didn't always destroy cities. Sometimes they spared them. If they surrendered quickly, offered tribute, and didn't smell like rebellion. But some cities resisted. Some cities trusted their walls. And those cities became stories. Historians still debate how many people died in the worst of these events. Numbers vary, as numbers always do when dust covers the ledgers. But there's no argument about scale. Some places were erased so thoroughly that no one rebuilt them. Others were rebuilt and destroyed again. The Mongols were efficient. Not cruel for cruelty's sake, but terrifyingly strategic. Psychological warfare dressed up as divine punishment. When they took a city, they made sure word got out. This is what happens when you say no. And the message stuck. Your bones feel that message now, humming through the stone floor beneath your bedroll. The next morning, you explore further. There's a collapsed library, half the walls still standing, its arches open to the sky like empty windows on a ghost ship. You find fragments of burned parchment, letters curling away from ink. One of your group finds a metal stylus and tucks it into his coat pocket like a relic. Nearby is what used to be a marketplace. You can almost hear the echo of bartering, the rhythm of coins slapped into calloused hands, the sound of a baker yelling about undercooked loaves. Now it's pigeons. Lots of pigeons. One of them stares at you like it's seen things. You move on, further down a side street. You find a stone bench with moss growing up its legs, and you sit for a while, listening to the way the wind moves through broken windows. It's oddly soothing, like the city is still trying to be something, still offering what little comfort it can. At the far edge of the ruins, near what might have once been the East Gate, you come across something that stops you. It's a stone column, cracked, leaning, but carved from top to bottom with names. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Some have faded. Some are still clear. Names of families? Falinvalios? Citizens who never got a proper goodbye? You run your fingers over them. Each letter a small defiance against forgetting. Someone behind you mutters, "It could have been us." You nod. It still could be. That's the truth of this whole era. Really, survival isn't a reward. It's a delay, a grace period, and no one knows how long theirs will last. The group leaves the ruined city that afternoon. No one says much. It feels disrespectful to speak loudly here, like laughing at a funeral. You glance back once before the walls disappear behind the trees. Try to lock the image in your memory, just in case this place disappears again. It's strange, walking away from a city that doesn't even remember its own name. But then again, you're a part of that forgetting too. You didn't build it. You don't know who ruled it. You only know it failed to survive, and that's all anyone will say about it in 100 years. There used to be something there, they'll say, not sure what, and the silence will do the rest. That night, the group is quiet around the fire. Even the merchant doesn't try to bargain over blanket space. You eat lentils and watch the sparks rise like prayers. Someone hums a song that doesn't have words anymore. And you wonder, how many other cities have vanished? How many homes are now footnotes? How much of history is just shadows and burned bricks, still pretending to be walls? You pull your cloak tighter and close your eyes, not because you're tired, but because you can't bear to look at the world anymore today. It's too full of ghosts. By now, the general consensus is clear. Survival has less to do with bravery and more to do with looking like someone worth not killing. Which is how you find yourself in a smoky barn-turned schoolroom learning how to pretend to be a blacksmith's apprentice, despite your complete lack of interest in iron or tools that get hotter than your anxiety. The Mongols, as terrifying and efficient as they are, have shown a curious tendency not to obliterate absolutely everyone, just the useless ones. Or more specifically, the ones who seem unlikely to contribute anything of value to their ever-expanding empire. If you're a blacksmith, a wheelwright, an astrologer who can read omens in goat entrails, or constellations shaped like awkward vegetables, you might just live to see another sunrise, which is how your refugee camp, once full of weeping and hunger, has now transformed into the most chaotic, desperate vocational fair in recorded history. There's a group of former farmers teaching one another how to act like potters. A butcher is now officially an herbalist. Someone has declared himself a glassblower, even though he's never seen glass up close and gets winded trying to blow out candles. And you? You're hammering a chunk of metal with all the elegance of a particularly angry toddler and hoping the Mongol talent scouts are short-sighted and easily impressed. You've heard stories. That's what everyone says in hushed voices around campfires or while gathering firewood with unnecessary caution. The Mongols don't just destroy, they absorb. They take engineers, scribes, doctors, even musicians, and whisk them away to cities you've never seen, far off in the east, where knowledge is gold and not being dead is apparently part of the benefits package. One man claimed he saw a Mongol commander stop a massacre mid-swing to spare a carpenter with unusually strong thumbs. Another swore a woman survived an entire village purge because she knew how to make exceptionally fluffy flatbread. No one knows what the Mongols actually want. But just in case it's accordion players, someone has already built one out of goat skin and a series of hollow reeds and is currently learning to wheeze out green sleeves with deeply worrying confidence. You're not sure whether to applaud or flee. There's something almost theatrical about the camp these days. Everyone's performing, not just pretending, but really pretending. People walk with the confidence of someone whose skills were definitely not learned 3 hours ago. Conversations are full of technical words no one fully understands, like tempering and grain direction and conical airflow theory. It's like living inside a poorly translated instructional scroll. You hear someone call themselves a wind architect, which isn't even a thing, but no one questions it. You find yourself practicing your blacksmithing monologue under your breath. Ah yes, I forge iron with layered carbon to maximize structural rigidity. You trail off when you realize you're talking to a chicken. And yet, in a strange way, it's kind of working. People are laughing again. Nervously sure, but still. They're teaching each other, helping. If fear is the mother of invention, then paranoia is its overachieving cousin. You watch an old woman patiently instruct a former innkeeper on the subtle art of weaving baskets while pretending not to cry. Someone who once only ever churned butter is now passing himself off as an apothecary, using crushed berries and conviction. There's even a young couple who've started a rumor that Mongols love acrobats and now spend their afternoons falling off logs in slow motion, calling it practice. It's part circus, part crisis, and entirely fueled by desperation. You get better with the hammer. Not good, exactly, but your swings are less panicked now. You learn how to heat a piece of metal until it glows like the inside of your skull during a fever dream, and how to twist it into something vaguely nail-shaped. The blacksmith you're learning from, a barrel-chested man with 3 teeth and a name that sounds like a sneeze, nods approvingly. That's not terrible, he says. It's the highest praise you've received in weeks. You cling to it like it's a blanket. The thing is, you start to like it. The rhythm, the sweat, the way metal sings when you strike it just right. It's not exactly peaceful, but it's real, tangible. In a world full of shadows and whispers and vanished cities, there's comfort in hitting something until it behaves. One morning, a rider approaches. Quiet, no fanfare. Just a figure on a horse, appearing like a mirage at the edge of camp, watching. He circles once, then twice. Observes the blacksmith area, the weaving tents, the acrobats. Then he rides off. No words, just that stare, like he was making a list and checking it twice. The entire camp holds its breath for a full hour afterward. You notice people walking straighter, a sudden shortage of loitering. Someone yells at a chicken for lowering the tone. You keep hammering, sweat stinging your eyes, praying silently that you looked like you belonged, that you looked necessary. Historically, this wasn't far off. The Mongol Empire, brutal and vast, had a curious respect for usefulness. Artisans, engineers, and intellectuals were often spared, relocated, and even employed within the empire. Cities that resisted were often annihilated. But those that surrendered and offered tribute, especially in the form of skilled laborers, were often assimilated, sometimes even rewarded. It wasn't mercy, really. It was pragmatism. Genghis Khan wasn't interested in burning down potential. He wanted an empire that functioned, that impressed, that lasted. And you, humble blacksmith in training, might just be a very, very tiny cog in that machine. Still, you never relax completely. Every time a dust cloud appears on the horizon, your stomach flips. Every time a bird squawks too loud, you assume it's the opening act of an apocalypse. But you keep working. One morning, you wake up to find that someone has made a sign above your forge. It says Smithy number 3 in crooked letters, with a crude drawing of a hammer beside it. You didn't make it. You don't know who did. But it makes something settle in your chest. A place, a label, a role. Even if it's fake, it feels like armor. And maybe that's the trick. Looking useful until you become useful. Pretending to survive until you do. You stand straighter now. When someone asks what you do, you say Smith without flinching. You correct someone who misnames a tool, even though you only just learned it yourself. The confidence is a costume, sure, but it fits better every day. You stopped hoping the Mongols never come. That's too big, too fragile a wish. Now you hope that when they do, you'll look like someone they need. Someone worth sparing. Someone worth stealing. Until then, you hammer. By some cosmic miracle, or more likely your newfound and extremely performative blacksmithing skills, you don't die. In fact, you're taken. Not kidnapped exactly, but reallocated, as the Mongols might put it, bundled into a supply caravan along with a few dozen other valuable contributors to the empire and hauled eastward into the endless, undulating sea of grass known as the steppe. If you thought the ruined cities were eerie and the forest was uncomfortable, the steppe is a whole different beast. Open, enormous, with nothing to block the wind except your poorly padded body and the occasional shrub that looks like it gave up on life halfway through sprouting. There's something dizzying about all this space. Skies so wide it feels like it could fold down and press you into the earth. Grass that hisses in the wind like it's trying to whisper secrets, and absolutely no buildings. Not even a sad wall. You see yurts for the first time. Circular, felt-covered homes that seem impossibly cozy considering they look like large, fabric mushrooms huddled against the horizon. You're assigned one almost immediately, shared with 3 other new inductees and a goat that may or may not be in charge. Welcome to your new life as a semi-useful pseudo-nomad. Daily life here operates on a different wavelength. Gone are the tight, anxious rhythms of village life or siege camp desperation. Here there's grazing. So much grazing. You're up with the sun, which comes early and unforgiving on the steppe, and your job is to not die while assisting with chores you've never heard of, much less done. You churn yak butter, which is about as glamorous as it sounds, involving a sack of sour milk, a lot of shaking, and a deeply personal relationship with smells you'll never be able to unsmell. You shovel dumb, because fuel doesn't grow on trees. Literally, there are no trees. You learn to set up and take down yurts with alarming speed, which is necessary because nomads don't stay in one place long. One day you wake up next to a stream. 2 days later, you're on a windy hilltop with no stream in sight, surrounded by sheep that look like they've seen some things. It's not easy, but it's oddly peaceful. You're never bored. Exhausted, yes. Confused, frequently. But bored? Not once. The food is interesting. There's a lot of meat, most of it boiled until it gives up all resistance, and dairy. So much dairy. Things you didn't think could be fermented absolutely are. Mare's milk, for instance. It's called irag, and it tastes like sour yogurt and betrayal. At first you choke it down out of politeness, then out of peer pressure, and eventually because you start to like it in a way that concerns you deeply. You begin to realize that your body is adapting faster than your brain. Your hands are rougher, your sense of smell more tolerant. You even catch yourself admiring the efficient beauty of a well-tied horse blanket. You go from stumbling after goats to guiding them with casual shrugs. From gagging on steppe cuisine to judging someone's dumplings for structural integrity. Your yurt mates accept you, not warmly, but practically. If you carry your weight, you're one of them. No big speeches, no awkward initiation rites. Just belonging wrapped in wool and dust and shared tasks. It's refreshingly straightforward. The Mongols themselves, the full-blooded nomads born to this land, are everywhere and nowhere. They come and go in swift, calculated bursts, checking supply lines, measuring loyalty, gathering warriors. One day you're being taught to stir soup by an old woman with 3 teeth and a sharp elbow. And the next you're watching a mounted archer hit a galloping target from across a valley like it's Tuesday. These people are built differently. Not just physically, though yes, they do have that grew-up wrestling bears before breakfast vibe, but mentally. They move with purpose. They speak in clipped sentences. They make decisions like flipping coins, except every coin lands in their favor. And they're shockingly funny. Dry, deadpan, straight-faced humor delivered in between goat wrangling and bowstringing. A Mongol once pointed to your badly tied saddlebag and said, you've invented a new form of knot. It's called why horse angry. You nearly choked on your yak milk. There's no formal school here, but you're constantly learning. How to read the sky, how to predict storms, how to treat a wound with powdered herbs and spit. You learn that the steppe isn't empty. It's alive, full of tiny movements and subtle signs. A patch of grass that grows bent indicates prevailing wind. A bird call at dusk might signal a predator. You're taught to listen, to observe, and weirdly, to relax into uncertainty. Nothing here is guaranteed. Herds wander. Weather changes. Sometimes you move because the horses are restless. Other times because the shaman had a dream. Life is fluid, temporary, always packing or unpacking. You start to understand why fixed cities seem so absurd to these people. Walls make you feel safe, yes, but they also trap you when the world shifts. Out here, there's nothing to trap you. Just you, your goat, and the unrelenting sky. Historians still debate how much assimilation occurred between captured or absorbed peoples and Mongol nomads. Some sources suggest entire communities were relocated and made to adapt, while others argue that these were temporary arrangements, useful until a better use was found. What's clear is that the Mongol Empire didn't just conquer people, it reshaped them. Nomadic life was both a strategy and an identity. And if you could contribute, you stayed. If not, well, best not to dwell. You, luckily, seem to be pulling your weight, at least enough that no one has thrown you off a horse yet. You've even been given your own tiny riding pony. She's grumpy, slow, and will absolutely bite if provoked, but she's yours. You name her Hiccup, and she tolerates you better than most humans ever have. One windy night, huddled in your yurt under blankets that smell like goat breath and ambition, you think about your old life. The stone walls, the fear, the soup that might have been moss, and you realize this is better, not easier, not safer, but more real. You're useful. You're learning. You're part of a system that moves, breathes, and yes, occasionally demands fermented horse milk at awkward social gatherings, but one that works. You've even made friends. Sort of. One of your yurt mates offered you a handmade belt last week. You responded by crying, which she pretended not to notice, though she did offer you an extra dumpling later, which in steppe culture is basically a marriage proposal. You fall asleep that night with the wind singing against the yurt's sides, the fire down to embers, and the goat snoring beside you like an elderly accordion. You're not sure how long this life will last. Maybe the Mongols will move on. Maybe you'll be sent elsewhere, drafted into a forge, shipped to a distant court to serve as the foreign expert on who knows what. But for now, you have your place, your tasks, your fire, your pony. You're not surviving anymore. You're living, one bowl of yak butter at a time. At first, it starts with something as harmless as soup. More specifically, a shared bowl of suspiciously well-seasoned dumpling broth handed to you by a wiry, leather-skinned woman named Tolkuna, who's got more wrinkles and expressions, and who everyone refers to as grandmother, though she's not related to a single person in the year cluster. You've been helping patch up saddle straps and swatting flies for hours when she handed you the bowl with a glance so sharp you nearly bowed. "Good work," she muttered, and then, under her breath, "Keep your ears open. Your hands too." You thought it was some kind of poetic thank you until later that evening, when she pressed a folded scrap of goat parchment into your palm and walked away like it never happened. You opened it only to find a smear of red paste and what looked like a badly drawn duck. You stared at it for 10 full minutes before realizing it was not a duck, but a very lazy depiction of a specific banner design, a heraldic symbol belonging to one of the regional governors recently absorbed in a Mongol command. You, an involuntary blacksmith with mild goat trauma, had just been handed your first piece of espionage, and soup had been your initiation. Life on the steppe might seem like a blur of livestock and fermented dairy, but underneath that rustic charm simmers an impressively active layer of low-stakes subversion. You learn quickly that spying in this world is not like the scrolls described it. No invisible cloaks or assassins with exotic daggers. Instead, it's gossip weaponized. Whisper names, slightly overcooked bread that signals someone has important news. Sheep dyed with a single patch of bright wool to mark safe passage. And yes, dumplings with slightly too much cumin to mean watch yourself. Tolkuna, as it turns out, is not only the camp's unofficial matriarch, but also a node in a sprawling web of information runners, made up almost entirely of old women, traveling smiths, merchants with bad teeth, and children with nothing better to do than memorize troop movements while pretending to chase geese. You never quite agree to be part of it. You just are. Once you receive a second parchment, this time with a clear drawing of 3 tents and a squiggly river, you're in. Your role is simple. Observe the riders when they come through. Know what they carry. Count horses. Smell for foreign herbs in their supplies. You're trained badly, quickly, and with mostly sarcastic instruction on how to describe armor types, read directional scratches on bones, and hide messages under the lining of your boot. It's like spy school, if spy school was run by people who still thought leeches cured everything. At first, it's kind of thrilling. You're finally important. You, the one who barely survived your first yurt setup, now part of an underground resistance fueled by fermented milk and petty revenge. You feel clever, necessary, powerful even. Then, one day, someone disappears. Her name was Bale. She was about your age, quick-witted, sarcastic, and terrifyingly good at reading lips from across a field. She once told you the entire conversation between 2 drunk soldiers just by watching them argue while pretending to collect firewood. She was the one who figured out that 2 of the Mongol riders weren't just guards. They were inspecting villages for blacksmiths with specific skills. And then, without warning, she was gone. No explanation, no farewell, just silence. You asked around. Tolkuna just looked at you with eyes that had already cried too much in this life. She talked to someone she shouldn't have, was all she said. You don't sleep well for days after that. Every shout in the distance, every unfamiliar hoofbeat makes your heart jump. The thrill is gone, replaced with the slow drip dread of realizing you're in something real now. Not a game, not a joke, and certainly not the rustic drama you imagined when you tied your first hidden message under a goat's collar. Historians still debate just how much grassroots resistance the Mongol Empire actually faced. Some records speak of organized rebellion networks across Asia and Eastern Europe, full of secret informants and subversive monks. Others argue these were isolated sparks, too scattered to burn anything significant. But what no one denies is this. People talked, even in fear, even under watch. Empires move on loyalty and silence, and when those start to crack, even quietly, it matters. You, unfortunately, are one of those cracks now, a small fissure in an empire of iron. One morning, Tolkuna gives you a bar of soap. At least, it looks like soap, smells like garlic and shame, and it's the wrong color, But you know by now that nothing is ever what it seems with her. You cut it open and find a sliver of bone wrapped in wax. On the bone, etched lines and dots, coordinates. You're to deliver it to someone 2 camps east, hidden among the goat herders, who will know what it means and where to send it next. It's a test of loyalty, of nerve, of just how much fear you can swallow in a single gulp. So you go. You walk for 2 days. Sleep in grass. Talk to no one except one overly friendly cow. You arrive with blistered feet and eyes that won't stop twitching. You give the bone fragment to a man who looks like he hasn't blinked since the last eclipse, and he nods like you handed him a spoon. Then he vanishes into a tent, and that's it. No thanks. No explanation. You walk back in silence, feeling like you left a piece of yourself in that strange, whispery place where the steppe meets the sky. When you return, the camp is quieter than usual. Not solemn, exactly, just watching. People look at you like they're seeing you differently. Tolkuna offers you another bowl of dumpling soup and doesn't say a word. But she sits beside you, just for a moment. That's all the thanks you'll get. And somehow it's enough. You're deeper in now. Trusted. You know the codes. The signs. You can recognize a Mongol commander's mood based on how his horse is brushed. You've learned to copy handwriting. You've buried messages in salted meat. You've marked enemy scouts with chalk dust while pretending to fix their reins. And every time you do it, you feel a little less human. Not because you're doing something bad, but because you're becoming something else. Someone whose face can lie, whose hands hide things, whose loyalties no longer belong to any flag, but survival itself. And yet, you still wake up every day and churn the yak butter. You still scrub cooking pots and fetch water and pretend your heart isn't racing every time a new rider arrives. Because the life of a spy, it turns out, is mostly doing completely ordinary things while constantly imagining your own death in vivid detail. The line between normal and fatal is gossamer thin. You could be laughing one moment, caught the next, and no one would know or care. That's the other thing no one tells you about espionage. It's terribly lonely. You can't talk to anyone. Not really. Can't relax. Can't be yourself. Because you're not sure who that is anymore. Sometimes you wonder what the point is. Whether the scraps of information you pass on are helping anything. Whether these whispers and markings and secret herbs and boot soles are actually building something. But then you remember Bale. You remember the look on Tolkuna's face. You remember the ruined cities, the empty wells, the silence that hangs around the bones of once living towns. And you think, maybe the point isn't to win. Maybe the point is to matter. To resist in the smallest, quietest way possible. To be the breath that stirs the dust. The ember that reminds the fire it once burned. You go to sleep that night with your boot tucked under your head, message safely hidden in the heel. The wind howls outside like it knows your name. And you dream of cities that no longer exist and faces that no longer smile. But in the dream, you're still walking, still passing messages, still trying. And for now, that will have to be enough. Winter doesn't arrive so much as descend, sudden, vast, and unmistakably malevolent. One day the steppe is chilly, brisk enough to make you cinch your wool tunic tighter and grumble about wind angles. The next, you wake up to a sky that looks like old tin, a ground stiff with frost, and air so dry it feels like inhaling powder glass. You stumble out of your yurt and realize your eyebrows are already crusted with ice. Eyebrows. You didn't even know those could freeze. The goats look offended. The horses, wrapped in thick felt, snort clouds into the air like they're exhaling judgment. And you, semi-trained blacksmith, part-time spy, amateur goat whisperer, are woefully unprepared. The winds don't howl, they shred. Snow doesn't fall in gentle flakes but blasts sideways, sharp as ash, piling against your yurt door until stepping outside feels like tunneling through the world's most passive-aggressive avalanche. There's no dramatic blizzard, just a steady, tightening grip day after day, and a growing realization that you are quite literally In nature's freezer with nothing but a bowl of turnips and 3 layers of optimism standing between you and the void. Food becomes a concept, not a meal, not a course, just a negotiation. The yak butter you used to churn religiously now freezes solid overnight, requiring a dagger and serious wrist strength to carve off a spoonful. Dried meat is scarce. Root vegetables are the main event, especially turnips. Endlessly boiled, mashed, roasted, or just gnawed on raw when patience dies before hunger does. Everything tastes like turnips now. Bread, tea, even dreams. You'd kill for something green, or crunchy, or anything that doesn't weep when you press it with a spoon. There's talk of a distant caravan that might be bringing supplies, but distant in steppe terms could mean 3 weeks, 2 horses, and a spiritual pact with a snow demon. So you hunker down. Everyone does. The yurts are sealed tighter. Fires burn low and steady. The smoke curling through roof vents and making every interior smell like smoked goat and regret. You sleep close, 3 to a cot, sometimes 4, with limbs tangled like unwilling puppies just to preserve warmth. Modesty is a summer thing. The cold does strange things to people. Some grow silent, others loud. One man begins telling stories about a fire demon who lives in the coals and judges the worth of your soul based on how you stir the soup. A woman sings lullabies to her boots. Children pretend their breath is a message from the spirits. You develop a passionate inner monologue about firewood, where it comes from, how it burns, whether that one stick looks judgy. You start dreaming about warmth in increasingly surreal ways. A sun made of bread, rivers of soup, a horse that breathes cinnamon steam and offers you slippers. The body adapts, but the mind frays a little more with each night. Time distorts. Days blur. Every sunrise is both a miracle and a reminder that you've got to get through it again. Work doesn't stop just because your fingers are brittle and your nose has given up. If anything, it increases. Animals still need tending. Tools still need fixing. Fires still need feeding. You've learned how to forge in gloves, thick, clumsy ones that make every task feel like trying to braid rope while wearing bread loaves. The metal fights you. The bellows wheeze like they've caught pneumonia. But still, you hammer. You fix sled runners. Reforge ice axes. Repair kettles split from frost shock. The Mongols admire endurance more than heroics. They don't praise you. They just keep you. And in this weather, that's reward enough. You know what happens to the weak? The ones who cough too long, who sleep too much, who slip once and can't stand again. They just don't come back. The snow hides things quickly out here. There's a saying among the nomads: a harsh winter teaches you which bones matter. You think about that as you rub your knees, raw from kneeling on frozen earth. Your joints ache, your lips crack. You wear your entire wardrobe daily: tunic, over tunic, cloak, extra cloak, 2 pairs of socks, 3 scarves, and still it isn't enough. The wind cuts through layers like gossip. You envy the goats. They seem smug, chewing on dry hay like the apocalypse hasn't landed squarely on your yurt roof. One day, a snowstorm arrives without warning. It's not loud, just dense like being buried alive in slow motion. You can't see 2 feet in front of you. You're caught outside, trying to tie down a tarp. For 20 minutes you stagger through white silence, heart thudding, frost eating your lashes, until someone grabs your sleeve and yanks you into a yurt. You collapse into the warmth, wheezing, eyes stinging. Later, they find out your scarf was frozen to your beard. You hadn't noticed. There's still no word on the supply caravan. Tol Kuna, ever the realist, starts rationing food more strictly. Portions shrink. Tea is brewed thinner. One night, someone swears they saw a shadow near the animal pens, possibly wolves, possibly desperation wearing fur. You sharpen tools not just for work, but for defense now. Everyone does. It's not said aloud, but the question hangs. How long can this go on? How long before surviving turns into selective surviving? One of the elders tells a story about a past winter where they resorted to boiling leather and chewing on yurt ropes. Everyone laughs, nervously. Then someone hides a pair of boots. Historians still wonder how the Mongol Empire maintained such cohesion through winters that would have crushed most sedentary kingdoms. Their mobility helped, yes, but so did their culture of shared endurance. No one was above hardship. Khan or commoner, you still felt the cold. Still watched your breath fog up your bowl. Still prayed your animals lived through the night. You've seen that here. Warriors ladling soup. Commanders mending cloaks. Everyone reduced to the basics. Warmth, calories, sleep. Titles shrink in the cold. All that remains is function. And still there are small mercies. Someone knits you mittens, lopsided, itchy, glorious. A girl offers you a bite of something that isn't turnip, and you almost cry. You find an old book of poems buried in the supply yurt. Its corners singed, the ink faded but still legible. You read by firelight, holding the pages over your knees to soften the stiffness. You find one line that sticks. In the deep stillness, the heart waits to remember warmth. It echoes in your mind every time you lie awake, shivering, dreaming of spring. Then, one morning, a sound you haven't heard in weeks, birdsong. It's faint, hesitant, but real. You emerge from a yurt, stiff and suspicious, and see the snow melting, just a little, along the edges of the rocks. A patch of grass, half dead but green, peeks through near the tethering post. The air smells different, damp instead of sharp, soft instead of cruel. A child runs past yelling. It's dripping, as though the concept of liquid water is brand new. You smile for the first time in what feels like years. Winter isn't gone, but it's breaking, cracking open, surrendering. You survived. Somehow, peace doesn't arrive with fanfare or declarations. It drifts in slowly, like spring thaw, quiet, tentative, and slightly suspicious of itself. The snow melts not in a grand sweep, but in patchy surrenders. One morning, it's the trickle of water along the base of your yurt. Another, it's a gust of wind that feels almost warm against your cheek instead of like a slap from an angry ice god. And soon, bit by bit, life begins to move again. Herds stretch their legs. Children reappear from beneath blankets and layers of wool. And you realize you've stopped bracing. It's subtle at first. You sit outside a little longer. You laugh without checking over your shoulder. You catch yourself stirring soup without counting how many portions are left. There's no official announcement, no fireworks over the steppe, but the Mongols are less tense, the riders more relaxed, and fewer scouts disappear into the horizon with that look of grim anticipation. Word spreads, as it always does, not with messengers, but with the changing rhythm of the camp. The world is still occupied, still overseen by sharp-eyed commanders and horses that can gallop farther than your patience. But something invisible has shifted. There's a truce in the air. Not safety exactly, but a pause in the danger. They call it the Pax Mongolica, though not out loud. Not in your camp, anyway. You overhear the term whispered by a passing scholar, one of the rare literate types being transported east under the protection of a noble's banner. He says it like a spell, like something too fragile to say twice. Peace, Mongol style, isn't gentle. It's efficient. Trade routes reopen under armed patrols. Taxes arrive with a smile and a sword. Silk, spices, and strange coins from the West make their way through your hands, and you suddenly find yourself helping forge a tool that may end up in a land you've only heard of in bedtime stories. Cities are being rebuilt. Roads are being redrawn. Your camp even receives a new map, painted on stretched hide and marked with a peculiar stamp. Part blessing, part threat. You trace your finger along it and realize just how far you've come, not just in miles, but in lives. The person who once clung to a cart full of turnips fleeing a burning village is gone. In their place stands someone tougher, stranger, and more oddly equipped to survive an empire. Daily life settles into something resembling normal. But the new normal, a patched-together mosaic of old habits and new instincts. You still blacksmith, Though you're better at it now, your hands know the rhythm without thought. Your forge has been reinforced with stones from a nearby stream and tar from a collapsed caravan wagon. And someone even carved your initials into the side, as if to say, this one belongs. You help repair carts for merchants passing through, mend tools for herders, and occasionally sharpen weapons you hope never get used again. The yurt is cleaner. The fire burns longer. People stop by without a reason. Tolkuna, impossibly still alive and still terrifying, gives you a scarf dyed with plant pigments and decorated with a looping pattern that might mean friend or might mean adequate soup stir. She won't say. But you wear it anyway. There's time to think now, which is both a gift and a curse. In the quiet hours between meals and chores, you reflect on how much you've lost, on how much you never had, on the odd reality that you survived not because you were brave or clever, but because you were flexible, willing to change, willing to become things you never thought you'd be. A blacksmith, a spy, a goat midwife once, and you don't want to talk about that. Your idea of normal has shifted entirely. You don't flinch at the sound of hooves anymore, but you still count them. You sleep lightly. You always have two escape plans, even if one of them involves stealing a donkey and pretending to be a traveling juggler. Peace hasn't erased the trauma. It's just given it a quieter echo. Trade becomes a spectacle. One day, a caravan from far west passes through. Tall hats, red silks, metal clasps you've never seen before. They bring mirrors, bells, citrus fruit that smells like sunshine, and an instrument that sounds like a dying duck but makes the children dance. They speak in fragments and carry scrolls wrapped in oiled cloth. One of them paints your face in ink, smiling as they say something about the face of the land. You think they might be a poet, or a spy, or both. The Mongol guards watch but do not interfere. This is the benefit of Pax Mongolica. You can speak with strangers, trade with foreigners, and know, with surprising confidence, that no one will stab you for it, as long as you don't insult anyone's horse or forget to pay your tax. The empire feels vast now, not just in legend, but in evidence. You've eaten dried fruits from China, seen fabrics from Persia, and heard jokes from somewhere near the Black Sea. Cultures overlap like paint left in the rain, colors bleeding into one another, never fully blending, but never quite separate again either. You sit beside a fire with people who once would have eyed each other across battlefield lines, now arguing over the best way to brew tea or whether goats are smarter than camels. They're not, by the way. Goats are just more committed to chaos. The world has grown stranger, richer, and somehow closer. It's the kind of peace that makes you wonder how things were ever different. And yet it's not perfect. The peace is enforced. Stern, occasionally brutal in how it corrects mistakes. A merchant who tried to short a tax collector ended up tied to a post until his shoes melted. A local chieftain was replaced overnight, his name scratched from the ledger like spilled ink. You're reminded that this peace isn't kindness. It's utility. The empire runs on oil and fear in equal measure. And while the gears are well-oiled now, they can still crush anyone who falls in sideways. But that knowledge keeps things balanced. You don't speak out of turn. You offer tea to every passing rider. You make sure your tools are sharp, your yurt is neat, and your smile is polite but brief. It's a dance, and you've learned the steps. Peace means surviving long enough to care again. Historians still argue over whether Pax Mongolica was truly peaceful. Trade flourished, yes. Roads were safer. Cultures collided and combined. But resistance simmered beneath the surface. Autonomy was swallowed by stability. Was it peace if you had no choice? Or was it just the quietest kind of control? You think about that sometimes, especially when you see new travelers arrive, eyes wide, still bruised from whatever they left behind. You watch them hesitate at the camp's edge. You see the exact moment they realize they're not in danger anymore, but also not entirely free. You recognize it because you lived it. And yet, there is comfort in routine, in waking up and knowing, roughly, what the day will ask of you, in sitting down to a bowl of something warm and not having to check if it's safe, in watching the stars and wondering, not fearing. You've started carving again, small pieces of wood, bone, stone, nothing elaborate. Symbols, faces, stories. You trade them for dumplings or buttons or stories. One child insists your carvings bring good dreams. You don't argue. Peace, kind of. You are against all expectations, still alive. Older now, stiffer in the knees, thicker in the waist, definitely smellier by even generous medieval standards, but undeniably alive. You've outlasted sieges, starvation, espionage, cultural assimilation, and one unforgettable week where you were fairly certain your yurt was haunted by the ghost of a very passive-aggressive sheep. You've become something of a legend in your little corner of the Mongol Empire. Not a hero. No one's carving statues of you or writing epics about the time you correctly guessed that dumpling stew had too much salt, but a fixture, a survivor, the person who just kept going. Locals joke that you're like the stubborn moss that grows on the shaded side of the forge. Not flashy, not fragile, just there. You've earned a reputation as someone who knows things, not just where to find the best clay for repairs or which yak is most likely to bite children, but how to navigate the quiet spaces between danger and peace. People come to you now, asking for advice, tools, or occasionally, permission to court your niece, who was born somewhere between your third, narrowly avoided execution and that very awkward winter wedding involving fermented radishes and a runaway goat. Time has made your hands rougher, your shoulders heavier, your patience thinner, but your memory, well, that's sharp. You remember everything. The smoke on the horizon, the frantic packing, the forest that felt infinite until it rained, the town walls that couldn't hold, the soup that shouldn't have been soup. You remember the stench of fear, thick as wool, the sting of loss, sharper than any blade, the names of the people who vanished, and the faces of the ones who didn't. You speak of them sometimes around the fire, your voice low and slow, more gravel than melody. Kids gather with wide eyes, part curiosity, part disbelief. You saw the Mongols? They ask. You live with them? You nod, sipping something bitter and warm, and answer with that old peasant shrug that means, yes, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then, because you can't help yourself, you launch into another story, usually one where you fall in the mud, get mistaken for a noble, or nearly start a war because you tripped over someone's ceremonial goat. You've learned that laughter is almost as good as food, sometimes better. The yurt you live in now is yours alone. It leans slightly to the left and has more patch fabric than original material, but it stands. Just like you. Inside, your tools hang with purpose, blades, ladles, oddly shaped carving implements, one spoon that doubles as a weapon. You've got a shelf lined with trinkets from distant lands, a polished shell from the southern seas, a scrap of brocade from Persia, a crude painting that might be a camel or possibly a pastry. You've seen things now. Heard tongues that curl around vowels like dancers. Smelled spices you still can't pronounce. Shared tea with Mongol officers and rebel scouts, both convinced they were winning. You've become, accidentally, a sponge of history. Not the kind kings care about, but the kind that actually remembers what bread tasted like during the famine, or how long you could keep a pair of boots together using horsehair in pure desperation. There's a scar on your leg from that time you outran a fire. Another on your wrist from that botched spy mission you still deny being part of. Your left hand twitches in the cold because of a winter where you forgot what color your fingers used to be. You carry the past in your bones, your back, the rhythm of your walk. You don't mind. The body remembers what the mind survives. And yours has survived quite a lot. You've watched entire cities rise from rubble. Seen power shift hands like a hot coal, never staying still for long. Heard the same promises from 3 different regimes in the same decade. You know now that empires come and go, but peasants persist, like weeds, or mold, or suspicious stew. You've outlasted more banners than you can count. Kings don't know your name, but their tax collectors sure do. Historians still wonder what became of the millions of commoners who lived under the Pax Mongolica. Were they assimilated? Liberated? Forgotten? You chuckle at the question. The answer is, they became you. Bent but not broken. Changed but not erased. You, the unkillable peasant, cobbled together from soot, sarcasm, and sheer stubbornness. Your story won't be written on stone tablets, but it's etched into the earth by your footprints, into iron by your tools, into memory by your words. You've taught others how to patch clothes with grass, how to tell if soup is lying to you, and how to smile just enough to pass as agreeable, but never enough to be volunteered for anything. Sometimes on quiet evenings, you sit outside and watch the horizon. It still stretches endlessly, just like it did the first time you fled toward it, desperate and shoeless. But it feels smaller now. Not because it's changed, but because you've grown. You're not just someone on the steppe. You're part of it. Your sweat has salted the soil. Your breath has fogged its winters. Your stories hang in the air with the smoke. Children born after the wars run past you without fear. Some of them don't even know what a siege is. You let them laugh. That's the point of surviving, isn't it? To make sure someone else doesn't have to. And so, years later, older than most ever expected you to be, you're still here. Stirring soup that still tastes mostly like turnips. Mending boots with hands that remember fire. Dreaming of cities that vanished and yurts that never moved. You carry the empire in your pocket. Small tokens, broken coins, folded maps. And know that what remains of it lives not in monuments, but in people like you. The ones who kept going, who got clever when things got cruel, who learned how to survive every flavor of collapse, and still woke up the next day to feed the goats. You, the unkillable peasant. Part legend, part local nuisance, all endurance. And tomorrow? Well, it will be soup. And now, the fire has dimmed. The forge has gone quiet. The wind outside is a soft murmur, no longer screaming through the steppe, but simply whispering as it brushes past the old yurt you call home. You lie back in your cot, one leg crooked, the blanket lopsided as usual, and listen to the creak of the wooden beams and the steady rhythm of your own breath. You made it, not just through one winter, or one siege, or one near-death encounter involving an angry horse, but through a whole lifetime of noise and movement, fear and fumbling, stubbornness and soup. There's peace now, real or not, permanent or passing, it doesn't matter. What matters is the stillness that settles over you, layer by layer, like soft snow. You're warm, you're fed, you're not being chased, taxed, conscripted, or questioned. There's no hoofbeats in the distance, no smoke on the horizon, no urgency pressing at your ribs. Just the deep, satisfying hum of rest, of having endured. Your eyelids grow heavier with each breath. The world narrows to the rhythm of your chest, rising and falling. Inhale slowly through your nose. Hold, and let it out like you're sighing away centuries of tension. Again, and hold now. Let your shoulders sink. Let your jaw unclench. There is nothing more to fix, nothing more to plan. Your body has earned this stillness. Picture it now. A moonlit plain, the grass swaying gently, the stars clear and sharp above. The fire crackles beside you, low and comforting, while the smoke coils upward in lazy spirals. A few goats snore in the distance. One of them probably dreams about being taller. But here, in this moment, you're just a quiet soul under a wide sky. Safe, still, home.